Hi guys, another long day at work done. Kids are in bed. I got a bit of time to myself, so figured I'd film another episode. Today's a pretty big day. Only a month into the channel, and I already have 10 subscribers today. So I'm pretty excited. I mean, 10 doesn't seem like much. Bushcraft Bartons has 40,000 subscribers, but it shows in the content too. So anyway, that's great. I really appreciate the support, and it's fun to see that some people are watching the content. So having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, we were talking about knives, and he was saying that he owns several of them, but he doesn't really have an idea how to properly sharpen them. So that gave me a great idea for another video. So I'm new to all this, especially the sharpening was always very daunting to me. I was more apt to buy something like this, which I did, but so you see these in kitchen stores. It's basically just two plates that you pull the knife through. So this is a nice one from Smith's. It's, if I remember correctly, it's about 15 and 20 bucks. So not a big investment, and it really does work quite nicely for the double bevel knives. And I use this for the double bevel. So these ones. So this one, like I was saying the other day in my knife video, has this one has a very long edge, and then it has a secondary bevel on the very tip. Right, so it's not a straight bevel. So for these type of knives, again, it's just my experience until now. These ones, when you pull it straight through, it does give it a nice edge, and I don't really worry about the angle as much. But for my preferred grind, which is the Scandinavian Grind, this one has the same angle, all the way to the tip. So that means that I have to respect that angle. If I use something like this, the angle is defined by the plates that are set in the mechanism. So if I start grinding this across, I'm going to start a new bevel based on this angle. So we don't want that. So we'll be looking at, I'll be talking a bit about the sharpening with stones. So there's basically two types of stones that I've seen on the market, either wet stones, water stones, sorry, or oil stones. Everyone seems to have their preference. I bought two. I personally like the water stones. They're a lot messier, but they do grind. I found it worked really nice, and it grinds faster than an oil stone. Not that I'm that much in a hurry, but anyway. So the water stone was really the way that I like to go. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in sharpening is, how do I know that my knife needs sharpening? Obviously, if you're going to use, so let me start that again. If you have a pocket knife, sorry, if you have a pocket knife, then a knife that is moderately sharp usually does the job. Something that you're just going to take out of your pocket to cut a cord, cut a string off a box, open up a package, just a basic utility knife, then usually your edge, as long as it's moderately sharp, it's fine. But when you come to bushcraft, when you're out in the wilderness, and like if you're going to set up camp, all of a sudden this thing is going to do you're going to be using it every 5 seconds and for 1,000 different things. So all of a sudden that edge that was just good enough for a pocket knife becomes a strain on your wrist. It becomes like every cut either takes 3, 4, 5 times as long as if like if you had a proper sharpened edge. it would be night and day. So the question becomes now, is my knife sharp enough? So the one test, and I've seen these guys on, I've seen the people with a piece of paper and then slicing it across, and then it was going right through the paper, and then it seemed very significant to the people that were doing it. I was thinking, okay, it's a piece of paper, so what? Until I realized, or I read, that a properly sharpened knife will go through the paper like butter. An improperly sharpened knife will tear the paper. So this is an example. This is, you guys have seen this before in another video. My knife needs a good little sharpen. Like the edge is nice, there's no nicks and dents, so I don't need to spend too much time on it, but it does need to be honed. So, and I'll give you an example. So at the beginning of this video, I'll show you guys just the simple, I'll just put it against the page and try to go so remember how this goes. I'm just applying pressure. Sorry, I'll just change over to a nicer edge. I'm just applying pressure. It's not really catching. It's trying to even tear from my hand here. Okay, it looks nice and sharp. And if I run my finger against it, it feels nice and sharp. And even a lot of people do this, right? I don't know how the lighting is on the camera, but if I scrape it across my nail, it is picking up fibers on the nail. So that test is already passing the nail test. This knife, sorry, is already passing the nail test, however accurate that is. But it's definitely not passing the paper test. So I'll show you the Waterstone that I got. And so I got this off of Amazon, either Amazon or eBay. I don't think it was very expensive. Probably about 30 or 40 bucks, which might sound expensive, but considering that this thing will probably last about, like, with the rate of that I sharpen, it will probably last me about 5 to 10 years. So it's not a big investment when you think about that. So this comes in two sides. So you see the two different colors. One has a coarse grit. You can tell when you pass your finger along it. This is just dripping water. And then you have a fine. So you have a coarse side and a fine side. The coarse side, I think, is 1,000, and I think the fine side is 6,000. So those are the two numbers that they define for the grit. It's kind of like sandpaper. The higher the number, the smoother it is. I guess that makes it exactly like sandpaper. So to store this, you just keep it in a container for water. Let it submerge. If you, I think I read it was recommended just to keep it in water all the time. Don't let it freeze; it'll crack the stone. But blah, blah. Anyway, I'm not gonna get all. Don't want to get too much detail. So grinds. The reason that often there's two different types of knife edges or grinds that you see on the internet. You'll see a lot more than two, but the two major ones that seem to be competing for bushcraft knives are the full bevel grind. So that usually starts right from the top of the blade all the way to down the bottom, which makes it what I call, or I guess not me, but anyway, what makes it a slicer. So the edge is very, very thin. It won't stand up to as much damage, but it'll slice. It'll really go into the grain of the wood. This is what they call a Scandinavian grind. So the reason that a lot of the bushcrafters prefer a Scandinavian grind is the fact that it's so easy for the freehand sharpening, and you'll see why. Because the essence of how to sharpen a knife on a whetstone is the fact that you have to find the angle of the blade, and that's when you're doing motions, you have to hold that freehand. If you can buy a jig that you can settle on the exact angle that'll hold the blade as you pass it over. There's nothing against that. I find the restriction of movement impeding, because it really, once you have a knife that has a Scandinavian grind, it's not that difficult. You just do it, and like I said, with the paper, you get that test at the end. You know you're doing it right or wrong. So let's just hop into. I'm gonna lower the camera a bit here. Okay. All right. So, this is what I store it in. Just submerge it completely in water, let it soak in. If you had it out of the water, let it soak in for a good 15 minutes so that it's completely saturated. This was in water before, I'm just re-immersing it. I don't usually do this, do the sharpening on this work table. This is my good work table, and this is quite messy. Like I said before, the water stones are messier than the oil stones. There's a lot more, the water's going all over the place, so there's a bit more cleanup. But you don't do this very often. So this little doohickey is just to hold the stone steady. You could do it without it. I had, before this I was using this against my table. This is something I made to hold the stone, so there's a little piece of wood underneath. It just knocks up against the table, and then this would be on top of there, and I can still push and it would just hold it in place. So you have to keep the surface full of water all the time. That's what replaces it. As you're using the stone, it wipes off the grit and the shavings or the particles of the blade. And so as long as you keep it nice and full of water, well, okay. So as I was saying, for the grind, the Scandi grind, it's very easy when you tilt the knife up. It's very easy to feel that it stopped there. Just so you know you're at the right spot. So that's why, like I said, the Scandi grind is easier to sharpen. So I saw a video from Ray Mears that was giving a technique. There's different ways. There's some people that go. I've seen some people go forward. Some people, I don't think it's a good idea to go backwards, because when you go backwards, you gotta accumulate particles on the tip of the blade, and you gotta make a burr. So you always want to go forward. So I find the edge, and I go forward, and I try to get the same exposure all along the blade, right? So a little bit on the diagonal, I go forward, and I go to the tip. So forward, tip. So since my edge is perfectly fine, I'm just doing one pass on the smooth side so that I can reform, I can get that edge. So I gotta go maybe 8 to 10 times on one side. You don't have to push too hard, just keep constant contact. Okay, that was probably a bit more than 10, but you do the same thing on the other side towards me. Alright, so I'm going to just go alternating. 1, 2. 1, 2. Alright, so I'm going to wipe off this. test that out. A little better, but no, not there yet. We're getting better. Might be different. My paper is getting wet here. So, don't think we need the heating. Okay, so different places of the blade will have different. So that's starting to be pretty. There you go. So the second part, or another aspect of sharpening, is stropping. Right, if I'm getting that right. So let me get you here. Zoom out a bit. Okay. So this is a product. You don't need this step. You can skip it because you were like you saw just a couple of strokes on the stone, and I was already getting the edge to where I wanted to get. On the field, often if I would go away for a weekend, I'll sharpen the blade before I leave. And I might just take a piece of leather with stropping paste or wax or whatever it's called on it. So as you use the knife, what the stropping does is this is a mildly not corrosive, but a mildly kind of like sandpaper. Okay, so if you can imagine the stuff on the top of the sandpaper, what's stuck on the paper. So this is a compound that does sort of the same thing. So the concept is just take a piece of leather and just put some of this, rub some of this on. So many of you have seen this in movies or whatever. You see a butcher just rubbing his knives on a piece of leather, because even just on the leather without this compound still does the stropping, just less effective. So this compared as opposed to the sharpening, you go away from the blade. So I'm just pushing lightly and rubbing the whole edge along the leather. All right. That thing goes through like nothing. So you saw it. So it basically in like 5 minutes, I got this knife from relatively, like, it was sharp enough. So no point in watching my chest. So basically, in 5 minutes, we went from a relatively dull blade to razor sharp. That's sharp enough to shave with right now. So this is ready. It's field ready. So to add on to the sharpening video, I also wanted to show you the same concept with your axes. When I was buying, in my ignorance, for years I've been using an axe to chop wood for firewood, and so I would just go to Home Depot, buy an axe, and just start using it. So the most of the time, you just look at the edge of the axe and you say, "Oh, that seems pretty sharp. That's pretty good." So I never sharpen an axe, and if I did, I just take a grinder to it till I get a relatively sharp edge, kind of like a lawnmower, and then again go to her. It served fine, but once I got into the bushcraft hatchets, and then the same rule applies to the knives. Like, you have to have a properly sharpened axe, and there's no excuse for having a duller edge on your axe than on your knife. So an example, I sharpened this several weeks ago, and I used it several times on different videos or on different projects, and it's still, like, you saw what it took to properly cut a piece of paper with the knife that was already sharp enough to scrape across your nail or feel sharp at the touch would tear this paper until I got it to a razor sharp edge, sharp enough to shave with. So with my hatchet, see, it's still cutting. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. It's still slicing. Needs a little bit of sharpening, but it's okay. So maybe a perfect example to tune this up with the Waterstone. So sharpening an axe, isn't much different from sharpening a knife. It's the only thing is that the edge on, depending on the axe that you're using, this one is a very thin blade. That's why I love it so much for wood removal and carving, because it's the edge here is almost like a knife. My other axe, this is used more, that I use it more for splitting, has more of a convex edge. If you can see, there we go. So it has more of a convex edge, so thicker. So if I compare the two, the straight edge will cut like a knife, and the other one will push the two pieces of wood apart. So when this larger axe hits the wood, it really separates the cut, and that's what you want for a good chopper. Because when you hit the grains of the wood, you want it to separate. You want the pieces to fly off, and that's where you're gonna get a lot of exposure. That you're gonna get through the cut a lot faster. When you hit a piece of wood with something like this, it sinks in. That's exactly what I want when I'm doing crafts, carvings, just general wood removal for precision. I want to go into the wood so I can control what's coming out. This thing, I just want to bash everything so I can just split wood for firewood or building shelter or whatever else. So each different grind has its purpose. So coming back to my axe, that just needs to get honed. The movement is a little different, but the concept remains the same. So I want to start, get some water on this. As opposed to a knife, which is front to, you could do like this. I'm sure it would still work. if I treated it exactly like a knife, it would still work. It's harder to find the edge on this because compared to the Scandinavian grind, which stops me when it's perfect, I really have to pay attention to where it wants it, which is about here. So once I've found it, I just want to move forward, and I'm kind of tilting from one side to the other. I'm exaggerating the movement, but I start here, and I end on the other edge, right? So once I found the edge, once I found the angle, sorry, that's one way to do it. The other way is to do small circles. So if I could turn this inside, I could do small circles. So Mike Barton had showed me this from Bushcraft Barton's. I really appreciated his video because I find this technique really works nicely for the axe, because I'm just going back and forth, and as I go back and forth I'm slightly changing the angle, so I'm getting a bit of everything, like everywhere, every surface of the axe, and I'm as I go on the one side I'm tilting down to get the very edge of the blade, and then coming back up to get the other edge. So I turn this around and you do the same thing on the other side. So slight movements. Could give it a couple more so I'm using the other technique now, not the circle technique, just more like a knife, going from one end to the other, trying to get the proper angle. This one's a little bit harder to get the angle because the whole edge is a bit round. Let's try that again. Yeah. Still not perfect, but very sharp. Very, very sharp axe. So, I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I just shaved hair off my arm. So, that's an example how the same technique, the same piece of equipment can be used for whatever blade you have in the shop. This is first and foremost a woodworking shop, I use this the same technique. So you can do this with all the kitchen knives in your kitchen. So you could use this same technique to sharpen all your kitchen knives still also. So, as always, I really appreciate you watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Hopefully that you learned something, and hope to see you again. If you like the content, please like the video. It really helps me a lot. Subscribe to the channel, sorry, to get updates on my next episodes. Thanks a lot, guys.